Hello and welcome to the video course about the four knights variation of the Sicilian defense. I'm Grandmaster Davorin Kuljasevic and I will be showing you how to play this interesting opening with black pieces. So whether you are looking for a new variation in the Sicilian or a completely new opening in your black repertoire, or you have a student which you would like to teach a new opening. I think this is a really nice choice. It's a variation that is quite suitable for beginners and for intermediate players, and I think it can be played successfully on the club level. It was my first opening starting out when I was just a young chess player. And I really liked it because, well, two things. One of them was natural development. So, as you can see here on the board, we have first the knights developed, both for white and for black. And after that, black is trying to develop his bishop either to b4 or c5, and then just castle and maybe even play in the center with d5. So really, there is nothing more natural than that. And the second thing is that it offers quite a few tactical possibilities early on in the game. And so you can imagine how a young player can get excited about, playing for some opening traps or winning a pawn or getting some sort of tactics going on early in the game. So these are the two advantages I think it has over some other variations of the Sicilian where the play is evolving a little bit slower. So are there any downsides to it? Well, not really. I mean, it's not such a popular opening compared to knight dwarfs and dragons and so on. The reason I think is because it's easy for white to transpose from this opening into the Sveshnikov Sicilian, if he knows the right thing, how to do that. But on the other hand, white also has several ways to go wrong from this position. And what he really needs to know is a lot of opening theory if he wants to get an opening advantage against the four knights defense. So, your typical beginner or club player who doesn't follow that much theory will probably play something natural here, like bishop e2 or bishop e3, or if he prefers the fianchetto, he will play g3 and so on. And then black gets a really nice game. On the other hand, there are some more forced variations that white needs to know if he wants to play for some more serious opening advantage. And we will take a look at all of that. But for now, it's important for us to know that it gives black a very natural way to develop his pieces and potentially even play for some opening tactics. And as I said, this was one of my first openings with black, so I really like it. And second thing why I chose to make a video on it is because I noticed that there is very few, if any, books on this opening or opening videos or things like that. It's just has not been covered in chess literature, it seems to me. It's been neglected a little bit. So I thought that this might be a good opportunity to make some contribution towards this opening. So maybe it's not a bad idea for us to already look at some variations so that you can familiarize yourself with it. I will come back to the starting moves, e4 and c5, just to clarify the move order, how to get to that position. So there are two ways to get to it. One is with the move e6 and the other one with the move knight c6. Sometimes it doesn't make any difference, but here I would like to point out that if we start out with knight c6, white has this very popular bishop move, the Rossolimo Sicilian, and if we start with the move e6, then this bishop b5 of course is not, well, it's possible, but it doesn't make any sense. So I think the better move order is to play with e6, because the bishop b5 variation is indeed something that you have to study quite seriously. So why not just avoid it with the move e6? There is very few moves that white can play here to punish you for this move order. And most players, anyway, prefer to play the Open Sicilian with d4. So this is how we get into the 4 knights variation. Now, we start with the move knight f6, attacking the pawn on e4. And this is one of the most common traps in the Sicilian for novice players. If they play e5, which looks logical to attack the knight, there is the double attack queen a5. So this is the first sort of opening trick in this variation. But really, very few players, only the beginners will fall for this. Instead of that, of course, we usually see the move knight c3 to protect this pawn. Protecting with the f3 is not that good. Also, bishop d3 is possible to protect it, and then we will see in one of the upcoming videos how to deal with that move as well. But let us focus on the main move order here, knight c3. And here the thing is that we can also play the move bishop b4 immediately to attack the pawn on e4 using the pin. However, now e5 is possible, and after the move knight d5 and bishop d2, this is another variation of the Sicilian. I'm not sure of its name, but anyway, it's a little bit suspicious. It's sort of been proven that white gets an excellent play here. And so I would really not recommend playing that unless you really want to surprise your opponent in a blitz game or something. But instead of that, we are looking to play a more solid 4 knights variation. And on the next move, bishop b4 is very much an idea for black. Now, what white can do here, he can play all sorts of moves. I think around 20 moves are possible. But as I said, some of the more natural moves for those who are not too familiar with the theory are bishop e3 and bishop e2. And then in case of bishop e3, for instance, in some variations the Najdorf or the Taimanov, white is going for this idea queen d2, long castle, and then also f3, and starting the English attack with g4. However, here this is not that good of a plan because of this move bishop b4, and then the pawn on e4 is hanging immediately, and then white can protect it. If he protects it with f3, then we play d5. This is very important to remember, so that we put a lot of pressure on this e4 pawn. And for example, some position like this is already in black's favor. Instead of that, white can play also bishop d3. That's a little bit better move, but we still play d5. Although I should mention there is also move e5, which makes sense as well for black. But let's say if we play d5, and then white captures the knight so that he can play e5. This was not possible before. Then we get usually this kind of position, which resembles the French defense a lot. But it's kind of an improved French because there is this pawn on c6. So black can sometimes push the pawn to c5, or he can also use the b file for his rook. And he will usually play the move g6 to close down, any attack on the king side. Sometimes knight c5 is also an idea. We will take a look at this position a little bit later, but it's important to note that this is a good position for black. So with the move bishop e3, really, when you play bishop b4, you get an excellent game. Similar to that, bishop e2 is answered with bishop b4. And now, again, some players who are not too familiar with this line, they will play either f3 or queen d3 to protect the pawn. But instead of that, actually the most critical line here goes like this, castles. So white is sacrificing the pawn on e4, but his idea is that there will be bishop a3 at some point and black will not be able to castle. Now knight takes e3 is a threat, so sometimes white sacrifices the second pawn like this, which we don't usually take, we play d5, or probably the main line runs like this, queen d3, again d5, and now in case of this move bishop a3, one thing that we can do, which we will cover a bit later, is the move knight e7, followed by castling. And I don't think that in this line, if black knows what he's doing, has absolutely any problems. So bishop e2 also, it's not, it's a natural move, but it's actually not challenging at all for black. Now a little bit more challenging move, in my opinion, is g3, and that's a bit surprising because you know, normally you don't think of these g3 variations as harmful in the Sicilian defense. However, there is a problem here if we play bishop b4, which I will explain a little bit later. And here I would recommend, instead of that, the move queen b6, attacking the knight. Now, for example, if he takes there and plays bishop g2, with the move bishop a6, we will stop him from castling. So basically, the only move that really can offer any advantage here for white is knight b3. And only now we play bishop b4. And after bishop g2, a very important move here is queen a6. Not allowing white to castle again. And here there is a really nice opening trap. If white attacks the queen, maybe hoping to repeat the moves after queen b6, there is a cunning move queen a4. And our idea is to capture on c3 and win this pawn on e4. So if he protects it, now we have this move, a very nice tactical shot, basically winning a pawn. So there is one, I think I won 2 or 3 games when I was younger like this, thanks to this move, queen a4. Instead of that, there is a better move for white, which is bishop d2, for example. And then we get an interesting middle game like this, where it's sort of just like a typical Sicilian position, especially if we can activate our pieces with the move d5. So this is with g3. We will devote a chapter to g3 as well. There are some other moves which are a little bit less common, like bishop g5. Well, the idea here is maybe, after our typical bishop b4, to try to win a piece like this. So this is one possibility why people would play bishop g5. However, here there is a nice tactical shot, queen a5, and the thing is that we return the piece, and not only that, but we get a great position here with black, the bishop pair and also the center. I mean, what more can you ask for from a opening variation? So this is one, again, I think I have played several games where white has fallen for this, so it's giving you an excellent position. Instead of this, on bishop b4, a slightly better move is knight to b5, and the idea is to maybe play for knight d6 and so on. And here the strongest move is h6, so one of the opening traps here is if he plays knight c7, he wins the rook, but on the other hand, he's going to lose material on the other side, because if king e2, we have knight d4, and black is winning. So all in all, bishop g5 is not really going to give you any problems if you play with bishop b4, and we will also cover that in the upcoming chapter. Some other moves like bishop c4 or f3 and some other rare moves which are played sometimes are not really challenging at all. In any case, black will play bishop b4, and he might even get a better game. So we will cover that in a separate chapter. Now let us take a look at more sort of serious attempts for white to get an advantage. So I should say that the two strongest moves and critical moves by opening theory are knight moves, knight takes c6, followed by e5 and knight e4. This is the first one, and the second one is a knight d to b5, actually using the only sort of a drawback of this opening setup for black, which is the weakness of d6 square. There is another move that attempts to play for advantage, but in a completely different way, in a more quiet way for white, and this is the move a3. It's actually a relatively rare move, but it has a very healthy idea, and this is to stop bishop b4 and basically force black to choose some other Sicilian setup. And here black indeed has a huge choice, but it somehow gets him out of his comfort zone. Now he has to play, for example, if he plays bishop e7, this will be more of a Scheveningen Sicilian type of position. Or if he plays queen c7, this is very similar to Taimanov Sicilian type of position. There is also an interesting move that we will talk about, e5, which wants to, basically black wants to transpose into some classical Sicilian or even Najdorf type of position. So a very interesting move, a3, and black has several ways to get an acceptable middle game with mutual chances. So we will definitely devote a chapter or two to this variation, even though it's not that common. But still, you need to know how to react to it. But coming back to our main attempts to get advantage. So this is knight c6, first one. And even here, white has some alternatives. For instance, instead of e5, he can play a natural move, bishop d3. And this is a good move. But on the other hand, it allows black to gain space in the center immediately with d5. And for instance, here we get a typical position for some Paulsen variations. Only in that position, a6 move has been played for black. So here maybe black has saved a tempo by not playing a6. And then, of course, he will castle, and he might transfer his knight to c5 in order to get rid of this attacking bishop on d3. Because in a lot of variations, if white is going to push e5, his bishop on d3 is an excellent attacking piece. Or in some variations, black is pushing his pawn to c5 and then attacking the bishop with c4. And either way, this leads to a very interesting middle game with mutual chances. So this is one possibility for white, although it's not considered the most critical. So the critical here is e5 and knight e4. Again, a lot of players here who are not too familiar with the theory, they will go wrong with the move knight d5, and then bishop d3. But the thing here is that actually these double pawns are not bad for black at all. He can get rid of double pawns by simply playing d6 at some point. But the more important thing here is that that black has a way to actually sort of punish white for the way he played by with this move queen c7, attacking the pawn. Now, if white will play f4 after bishop c5, he will have big troubles castling. So usually they play queen e2, and now the tactical point is this: bishop b4, check. And the thing here is that if he plays c3, he will lose material. So this is one nice opening trap. Otherwise, if he plays bishop d2, he cannot recapture with the queen because of the weakness of e5 pawn, so he's losing the right to castle here. So of course black has an early advantage. And this basically means that the strongest move for him here is king f1. But that already gives you an idea about black's achievement after only 11 moves. If white has to play such a move, then obviously black has at least a comfortable position. So basically here the only way, as we said, is to play for advantage is to play knight e4. Now the thing here is that if white plays c4 and kicks out the knight from d5, he is indeed going to have a big positional advantage. And here black has several ways to counter that. He needs to be quite active, and this is one of the most tactical variations in the whole four knights system. So the move that I like here is queen c7, and it is the main line, attacks the pawn, so f4 is forced. But on the other hand, this opens up white's king. And now the move is queen b6. Again, there are several alternatives to that, but this one I like because we are immediately trying to take advantage of the weakened e3 square. And here the main line runs like this, c4. The bishop d3 move is also possible, but as you can see, castling is not possible for white just yet, and so black has several possibilities which give him quite a good play. For example, f5 is one of them, playing like this. We don't have to be afraid of this check because king is quite safe here, or on c7. What else can he do? Maybe bishop e7 is another possibility, with the idea to counter c4 with f5. This time, in case of en passant, we can recapture, after knight takes, we can recapture with the bishop on f6. Again, with a very comfortable position for black. So bishop d3 is not really a critical move at all. c4 is. And now comes an important sequence where white can go wrong. If he answers bishop b4 with the natural bishop d2, this is where we have the tactical shot, queen e3. And now after queen e2, we take, and as you can see already, the f4 pawn will fall. And black gets an almost winning position here. So a very important tactical trick here, and white is pretty much forced to play king e2, which, you know, somebody who has never seen this variation before will hardly go for this. This is very sharp, and, you know, running with your king around like this early in the opening, really you need to be prepared for that. And the good news is that if you have looked at this video and studied this variation, then you will know already how to answer king e2, and this is with the move f5. So counterattack, and now he has again several possibilities. If he captures the knight, there is a really cute checkmating idea here. So he cannot take the pawn on e6 because of bishop a6 checkmate, and white is in trouble. If he captures the pawn, then we get a really comfortable position here like this, knight f6. And now bishop e3 is the main line actually. If they take the knight, you can see already that white is the one with the weaker king. The position has opened up, and indeed white has some problems with his development. So instead of that, bishop e3 is a better move. And this has been played by Karyakin, I think, with white pieces, so it should be the main line here. So this is how it goes, takes, takes. White has won a bishop pair, and there are some weaknesses on the dark squares for black. Black can also not castle just yet, but also, as you can see, white's development is quite bad, and this position is really unclear and gives chances to both sides in practice. Now, in theory, white is trying to claim the advantage here, and he might be able to do so, but only after very, very precise play. But here I really like black's practical chances. For example, now the move g3, for example here, rook d1, rook c8, and the move g3, which seems very natural to develop the rest of the forces, is going to be answered by c5 tempo, and then we can also develop the queen. Sometimes the king goes to f7 to connect the rooks, and really I think, at least in practical sense, white has as much problems as black does with his development. So an interesting position, and definitely if you're well prepared, better prepared than your opponent, you might get the upper hand. So this was this move f5, and instead of taking on f6, there is also move knight f2, And then black plays bishop a6 when the best move for white is king f3. So, you know, it has to be a really strong or very well prepared player who would go for this line. So this is shortly about this variation with knight takes c6 and knight e4. We will look at some more details later on in one of the chapters there. But I would like to use the rest of this introduction to focus on the main line, which is the move knight b5. And here, as I said, the idea for white is to somehow play for the weakness of this d6 square. And here black has three options. Two of them involve developing the bishop. So there are bishop c5 and bishop b4. And bishop b4 was actually the line that I was taught, you know, the first time I played this variation. And then there are some interesting variations if white plays knight d6 or if he plays bishop f4. And I really like those because they were quite tactical and gave black good counter chances. But the thing here is that there is the move a3, very simple way for white to gain the bishop pair advantage. Okay, black can play this move d5 and gain some space, open up his light square bishop. But you see, if white just plays simply, develops his bishop, he will have the kind of position which gives him a slight advantage in the long run. So black has the isolated pawn and white has the bishop pair. So whether black plays here now queen d5, when white can play like this, or if black plays bishop g4, which is a little bit more popular, forces f3, still I believe that white should have a slight advantage in such positions, especially in the long run. And it's fairly easy for white to learn this, no really big sidelines in this line, and he might get a slight advantage, and this is really not our idea. Our idea is to challenge white from the get-go, so instead of bishop b4 I would recommend two moves. There is a solid option with d6, we will devote most of the time to this move, and there is also a tactical option in bishop c5. So the thing here with bishop c5 is if he gives the check, we should really not feel too bad about our king on e7, because white has wasted some moves, you know, with his knight, and this gives black the advantage in development. So, for example, somewhere around here, if I continue with knight e5 and so on, I don't think I should fear anything with black. I mean, this is not the only variation in the Sicilian where king feels safe on e7. So bishop d6, knight d6 is not really that critical. There is a better move, maybe instead of knight c8, that goes like this, bishop f4, and then there is almost a forced variation here. We want to take this knight on f5, so if he returns to e3, we play bishop e6. Okay, the king is not that nice there, but we will find a way to bring it maybe to g7 or h7. But what's more important, I think, in the long run is that the bishop is extremely well placed on c5. And so this is an interesting middle game position. Instead of that, instead of knight d6, the main line goes like this, bishop f4, threatening knight c7, and then we castle. Now knight c7 doesn't work because of this typical interference, and probably the knight will just be trapped with b6 and bishop e7. So that's important. Secondly, if bishop d6 attacking the rook, we have a really nice tactical retort, queen b6, and he cannot capture the rook because of this beginner's checkmate on f2. So he should take here instead. And now we get a middle game where white will be a little bit behind development, and in some variations black can use this to his advantage. So without going into much details, let's just look at the main line, which is bishop c7. The point here is that now after bishop d6 takes, there is no queen b6, right? So one thing I can do here is to go for the endgame, which is very solid, but maybe slightly better for white. Or we can play for the middle game with queen d8. And now the point, for example, here is if he castles, he cannot play knight c7 because with rook a7 we can even trap his knight. So if he really wants to play for advantage, he needs to play knight c7. Now this might look a little bit unpleasant, but actually the knight on c7 is also sidelined, and we can maybe even trap it. And then bishop e2 is the main move, when b5 is a really strong way for black to untangle. It involves a temporary pawn sacrifice. But as I said earlier, if white is going to enter all these lines, then he really needs to be very well prepared. And most players, who are not theoretically strong, they will hardly get to this position. So here, without again going into much opening detail, I just want to say that black gets good counterplay, and especially if he is better prepared. So this is with bishop c5. It's a sharp alternative to the move d6, which I would set as the main variation here against knight b5. Here usually white continue like this, transposing into the Sveshnikov Sicilian. And here, instead of looking at all the main lines of the Sveshnikov Sicilian, I would like to recommend a sideline, bishop e6. So the main line here goes b5, knight d5, and so on. But instead of that, bishop e6, I think it's a nice sideline that leads to a similar type of position, but a little bit less explored, so white players may not be that well prepared against it. So against this move knight c4, which is very natural, now that b5 has not been played, instead of the move rook c8, which has been played earlier, rook b8 is kind of a new fashion, and the idea here is twofold. So first of all, when there was rook on c8, I just want to show this, then there were two possibilities. First, white can take here and play knight b6 with the tempo, attacking this rook. And now this type of position is advantageous for white, with these two knights here. Somehow he has a strong grip on black's position. Secondly, in case of rook c8, white can also play like this, knight d5 first, then he takes. And now he takes on d5 with the queen. The thing here is that knight b4 is not really possible because b7 pawn is hanging. But if we had played rook b8 instead of rook c8, then it would be possible. So with this move rook b8, black is basically killing two birds with one stone, eliminating basically two variations for white, or at least making them less dangerous. And here white has, of course, besides bishop f6 and knight d5, also some other possibilities like knight e3, playing for this d5 square. But as I said, this really leads to a typical position similar to the main lines of the Sveshnikov variation. And also, there are some sharp variations like this one, which involve a pawn sacrifice. But black gets an excellent counterplay like this with knight d4 and queen g5. And so on. So there is a lot to be learned here as well. A lot of sharp variations where, if you are a better prepared player, then it doesn't really matter what the objective evaluation is. You might get an upper hand just by, knowing your opening better than white. So in essence, this is what this variation is about. As I said, there are ways for white to play sort of normal moves, but then after the move bishop b4, really he has no advantage and black gets a comfortable game. Or if white goes for the more challenging lines, this means that he's better prepared. This would be either with knight c6, here knight e4, or instead of that knight db5, trying to transpose to the Sveshnikov Sicilian. In that case, you also need to be very well prepared, and this is why we will devote a few separate chapters to these two variations. So I hope that you liked this variation, that you want to study it a little bit further. I promise that it gives at least a very interesting counter chances to black early in the opening. And you know, when I was very young player, I think my score was somewhere around 60% with black. You know, playing the four knights defense. So later on, when I became a slightly stronger player, and most players played this knight b5 against me, then I transposed. I started to play the main lines of the Sveshnikov defense like this with b5. So you might give it a try to the four knights variation, and then maybe at some points you will make this natural transition into a very, very good and solid Sveshnikov Sicilian. So in the next video we will already start looking at some concrete variations in the bishop e3 variation.